for being here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sylvia Harris. I'm the CEO for the Kent Chamber of Commerce. So on behalf of myself, my staff, our board of directors, and our committees, we'd like to welcome you to our safety summit. And we hope that in that first 30 minutes, I know it was really warm, so I will apologize for that. They had some issues over the last few days, and so the room should be getting cooled down here in the next 30 minutes or so. But hopefully you're able to meet somebody that you haven't met before or haven't seen in a while in that first 30 minutes of networking. So that's something that will be different when you start coming to the monthly luncheons, is that we will have that 30 minutes of networking time there. So before I begin today, I would like to start by thanking our investors. And as you can see on your table, there's just a table tent there. And those are multiple investors that support the organization above and beyond their regular dues. And it provides us the opportunity to have programming like this and other programming that brings the business community together in a dynamic and profitable way. And so what I'd like to do is, if you are an investor, I'd like to have you just stand, and as we call on you, make a brief introduction of yourself, your company, and just any updates that you have from your industry or organization. So if you are from an investor level company, please stand. Awesome. Okay. Well, that's okay. That's all right. What that really means is that they're really interested in ensuring that we can put on this programming for folks that are in the community. So I do want to recognize our gold investors. We have Golding and Seattle Thunderbirds, our silver investors, Kent Reporter, the City of Kent, I Love Kent, and the Rainiers, and also Salem Media. And of course, you'll see our bronze level investors there as well. I also like to recognize our monthly luncheon sponsor is Abyssinia Hair and Clinic. Abyssinia Hair and Clinic is located on 218 First Avenue South in Kent. And just so you know, they just joined the chamber about a year ago. They just opened that location in downtown Kent. And so they're offering 25% off all of their salon services for our chamber members. So I want to thank them. And they also will have a presentation later today from our table sponsor, Fairway Independent Mortgage. It's with Cindy Cameron. And so on your tables, you'll notice that there are some flyers there that also double down as fans, so you can use those. And then she'll be giving her presentation a little bit later today. All right. So why are we all here today? I appreciate you all coming out today. I don't know if this is your first in-person event. We've had a few here at the chamber. But we have a panel today, so our goal is to have a panel of our local leadership here and talk about what the business community is facing as it relates to safety. Our goal today is hear the collective voice of our community and find how we support our local leaders to help change, enhance, or help understand the impacts of the new legislation. We encourage participation from each of you. The more our panel understands and hears our needs, the better they're going to be able for us to collectively come together and fight for what it is that we need. I will make a note that there are a few mics around the room, so if you have any questions, this is going to be a conversation where our panel is actually listening probably more than they're talking, which is a great thing for us because that's the goal of this today, so that we can understand how do we help them and how do they help us. So if you have a question, again, there are some hot mics in the back. You just want to grab a mic, and then Carmen, our moderator, will call you when she is ready. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our 2021 president, Julia Atwood, with Shannon & Associates. Julia has served on the board of directors for several years and has brought strategy to the chamber. Please help me welcome our 2021 president, Julia Atwood.
Welcome. This is my first in-person event, so I'm really excited to see everybody's faces, not on a screen. Usually I say when it's this warm, I want to be on a beach someplace, but so thank you for attending today. First, I wanted to have our ambassadors, I don't know if they're still at the front door, ambassadors, if we have any ambassadors to stand up. We need to still be greeting people. And if we can have our board members stand up for a moment. Thanks, Tony. Thank you all. It's It's my pleasure to introduce our conversation moderator and panel today. One of the benefits of being part of the chamber is that we could advocate for legislation, I'm talking this now, that has positive impact for the business community. So today on our listening panel is Chief Police Padilla and Kent City Council President Tony Troutner and Dave at the Grove with King County Council. And I'm going to introduce Carmen Goers, who is our moderator today, and she's also with Heritage Bank and the co-chair of our Government Affairs Committee. Co-chair.
Co-chair, yes. I'm going to stand over here, socially distancing without a mask because I can't do it. I just can't. I can't talk in all the things that happen. So, one of the things is, sadly, there's been a breakdown of communication between law enforcement and citizens. And part of the reason we're here today is to kind of bridge that to some degree. There are those of us that believe that law enforcement has used excessive force on law-abiding citizens, and there's others that have had the experience of property crimes and seeing repeat offenders back in our business locations and back in our stores. And so we need to work together in order to, as the reforms are coming out, legislation's coming out, to get to a place where we all can feel safe in our communities, know that we're protected, and that there's safety for our children as they go to and from school. So with that, I wanted to start off with some understanding and asking each panel from their perspective what the new legislation means to them, what it looks like, and giving us clarity for that understanding. So I'll start with Chief Padilla. At the very bottom.
There it is. Okay, can you guys hear me? All right, good. Almost afternoon. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. So, Carmen, did you want me to go through some of the laws, or just give me a high-level overview of what we're doing?
Some of the laws.
The laws. Okay. So, a little bit of background to prime the discussion. The new legislation on police reforms, there's a ton of them, and we could spend a week talking about all of them. But the two that are paramount, I think, for the discussion are House Bill 1054, it's been dubbed the Tactics Bill, and then House Bill 1310, which has been dubbed the Use of Force Bill. So before I get into that, because it's a good opportunity for discussion and understanding, I want to make it crystal clear. I serve on the executive board for WASPIC, the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. And collectively throughout the state, law enforcement has been very strong supporters of reform. I know it's not portrayed that way, but in the conversations and where the work's being done, we strongly support positive reform, right? At the same time, there are practical implications to what's been done. And a lot of it is going to come out and will be the end results are going to be what we wanted, but some of the things that have come out still need some discussion. And where that conversation is right now, you've probably watched a lot of back and forth in the media. I'm not a finger pointer guy. I don't appreciate it, and I don't like to be involved in it. There's confusion right now. And the reality is, if there's that much confusion between the law enforcement experts who've been doing the work and the legislators who make the laws, that's probably a good understanding that we need to look at it a little bit further. And there's commitment on both sides to do that. So I want to make sure that's clear. No one here is trying to be obtuse to the laws or say that's not what I'm here to do. But we should give you some clarity, because the impacts that I'm most concerned about will directly impact you, already impacting you. And you're probably seeing it more so than you have prior years. Okay, so that's where we're at. So House Bill 1054, the Tactics Bill. There's a lot to it, but here are some of the highlights. It banned chokeholds and neck restraints. Not an issue for Kent. I put a stop to those last June. So the other thing I want to say is Kent got way out in front of this. So we were well positioned when these laws came. Talks about canine policy. It prohibits tear gas unless there's a riot in the streets, riot in jail, or used by our tactical teams for like hostage negotiations, barricaded subjects, active shooter, those type of high level things. So not a big deal. Here's where we get into a little bit of a complication. It bans use of military equipment. And then they define what military equipment is. It's not what you might think. Military equipment to me sounds like tanks and fighter planes. That's not what they're talking about here. And it doesn't mean The law doesn't say that you purchase it from the military. It's defined in its own context. Most of that's not an issue for Kent. We don't have anything that they define. We don't have armed drones. We don't have tanks. We don't have any of that. We've never have. But where it gets into the place is it bans the use of munitions that are greater in size than 50 caliber. Okay? And I don't want to give you a munitions tutorial, but what that means is anything in size that's diameter bigger than a 50 caliber bullet is now banned. Okay, not an issue for us. We don't have 50 caliber bullets. But what we do have are 40 millimeter rubber Baton rounds. Anybody know what we use those for?
No, we have not had that experience. Just look straight ahead.
Ba-doom-boom. That was really good. That's our less lethal round. That's the round we use for the mental health crisis person that's armed who we're desperately trying not to shoot. It's banned. It also bans 37 millimeter, which is another alternative, and it bans the shotgun round, which is what we use for our beanbag rounds. Okay, and it's crystal clear. And we're waiting for the Attorney General to maybe give us some further understanding, but every legal advisor that I've talked to, and I've talked to over a dozen, it is banned. So there's an issue. Requires law enforcement to be readily identifiable. That's not an issue. That means we have to have our name or serial number. That's not a big deal. Another issue, however, though, in the tactics bill is it prohibits, basically, it nullifies pursuits, vehicle pursuits, period. Now, there's a lot of banter back and forth of, oh, if it's a dangerous crime and you have probable cause, you can pursue someone. Well, number one, very, very few times do we have probable cause when we start to contact someone to stop them and they take off. The standard that we have is reasonable suspicion, means I believe you may have committed a crime, therefore I want to talk to you, I need you to stop, but if you take off now and I don't have probable cause enough to arrest you, I have to let you go. That's another issue, okay? And it doesn't matter if you've committed murder or if you've committed a shoplifting. I have to have probable cause for one of the violent crimes, and that doesn't happen very often. Okay, and I will tell you, since the laws are enacted, we have let several felony criminals go because we are not allowed to pursue. Because we're going to follow the law. We have to, right? The law talks about dangerous crimes or violent crimes. If you read the statute, how many of you would say that a violent crime includes domestic violence assault? Yeah, I would too. It's not in the statute. It's not one of the things that we can pursue for, even if we have probable cause. So there's some work that needs to be done to fix some of that, in my opinion, okay? So those are the big issues with 1054. And we can talk about what the impacts are, but you think about the inability to pursue criminals when they drive off. So if you speed today in the city of Kent, and one of my traffic officers pulls you over, and you decide to flee and not stop, we cannot chase you. That is the law right now.
But the red light cameras are all around.
They are. Be careful of those. Actually, we found out that red light cameras are COVID proof. Did you guys know that? Because it's amazing. A lot of tickets going through there.
Yes, we have received them. We all just
Yes.
It's
all right.
It's one of our best volunteer programs.
Volunteer programs. All right. So second part of the background, and then I'll turn it over for the discussion part. The second law that has been a major discussion is House Bill 1310. It's the use of force law. And in that, the major issue with that is it elevates the requirement of law enforcement when we are going to use force. So everything was based on reasonable suspicion. I see you walking away from a business that has a broken window and an alarm's going off. It's 3 o'clock at night, the business is closed, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm doing patrols, I see you leaving the business. I go, that doesn't look right. That would be reasonable suspicion that you've committed a burglary. I go to stop you, and before the laws, if you decided to resist and run, I could use reasonable and necessary force to detain you and do my investigation. The rest of the nation operates by this standard, and we've been operating by this standard for over 50 years in law enforcement. As of July 25th, the standard is now probable cause. In the scenario I just gave you, the officer does not have probable cause to make an arrest. And if that person flees by the strict letter of this law, we're supposed to let them go. So that's the issue. It's elevated from reasonable suspicion to probable cause. So there's that. It talks about the duty to care functions. So you think about your mental health crisis out in the street, or unfortunately, tragically, like suicidal subjects. Those are not crimes, right? And we want to offer services and we want to get them help. In circumstances where there is no immediate threat to anyone, the law is strongly encouraging that officers not be in those circumstances. Now, I will say, let me be really clear. If there is another way to get someone services who's in mental health crisis, doesn't require a uniform, badge and gun, I'm all for it. I really am. Those circumstances aren't as common as you might think. Okay, they're dangerous. They're very dangerous. And so now we have required that if they're not a danger to anybody, including themselves, the officers have to leave. So the question for me as the chief of police is, why would I put my officers in that situation in the first place? Where's the upside for them? Because if they mess up, there are severe, dire consequences that have been added in other parts of the laws. They've made it incredibly dangerous for officers to make a mistake, and in my opinion, even in good faith. So that's what we're dealing with. And so I'll pause there because we could talk, like I said, for the details of the laws. Those are the high level issues that are a major concern.
So thank you. And as was mentioned, we're going to take questions from the audience. And so if you're posing a question, please, one, have a question and direct it to a specific panelist that you're referring to. Councilmember Updegrove, is there anything you'd like to add regarding how the sheriffs are impacted by this along the same side? And it's common when there's things that happen with fire or rescue that the sheriffs are there too. Does that change how they engage with the citizens?
First is this one.
Nope. I'll stand close and you start talking about other things.
Yes, no, thank you. My short answer is I don't know. The county council hasn't, as the legislative branch, gone through and been briefed on all of the impacts of the recent state legislation on the sheriff's department. What might be useful is about 30 seconds of background on kind of what the county's role is.
Yes, please do that.
King County government runs the sheriff's department, and they provide police services in areas where there are no cities. You know, White Center, Skyway, Vashon Island, and the rural areas. Some cities also hire King County to provide their police services, in which case some of the policy comes from those city councils. We are in the process in King County of hiring a new sheriff. The voters voted to have the sheriff being appointed rather than an elected position. And we have a sheriff who's completing her term, and one of the decisions I'll need to make is whether or not to confirm an appointee of the county executive. We also, when it comes to responding to crime, have an independently elected prosecutor. So the county council doesn't make decisions on what gets prosecuted and what doesn't. We also in King County have independently elected judges. So the county council doesn't get to have a say in how long or whether people are locked up. And I mention that because I have a lot of folks come to me saying, why aren't you prosecuting X, Y, and Z? We do have a responsibility to fund those systems, and they are, we have tremendous backlogs in our court system, and I believe that contributes to the lack of prosecution. For example, there are, as of the most recent polling of the statistics earlier this year, 408 sexual assault cases with the average age of the victim being 16 years old. There's 408 of those that have been waiting more than 2 years to go to trial. We have nearly 200 murder cases waiting to go to trial and limited resources. So I wanted to sort of paint the picture of what does the county sheriff's department do, who do they serve, and what are the different roles at different levels of government. And I think it's in large part because we've had an independently elected sheriff that we have not traditionally been involved in these kind of tactical decision questions. And also we have a lame duck sheriff who's quite frankly never been super strong in communicating with the council. So we're in kind of a little lame duck period where we don't have the best communication between the council and the sheriff's department. And with COVID, we just haven't sat down with the sheriff's department to get fully briefed on the nuances of the impacts. But we didn't allow chokeholds. We haven't for about 8 years. We don't get equipment from the military except some search and rescue. So in those areas, there won't be an impact. But I haven't, some of this was the first information I heard. It was very interesting and in some ways troubling.
Thank you. And Council President Ms. Faulkner, can you talk about what Kent City Council is doing as far as their legislation and their directives for law enforcement and safety in the city of Kent?
Well, obviously, we're supporting our police department and backing all of these changes that have to be made. And I know the chief has talked to us multiple times about how they're working through that process. But I think one of the things that is really important is us communicating with all of our residents and our businesses. And it's events like this. The chief and the mayor are doing a town hall, I believe it's Monday at the senior center from 6 to 8. But it's talking to businesses and residents so that you all are aware of what these changes mean to your business and to our community. And it's working together with you and listening to your concerns and how can we work together to provide a safe environment for everyone. And I think that that is going to be key moving forward through this process. As the chief mentioned, there's a lot of things that we're still working through, but it's making sure that you understand what those changes are, what those mean to your business, what those mean to you and your neighbors, and then providing us feedback on how we both work together to make sure that everyone is taken care of.
Can you speak to King Council Updegrove spoke about the backlog? That's at the county level. What about the city level? How are we prosecuting those crimes? I'm not sure that's your chief again.
Great question. So our municipal court did a fantastic job during the pandemic. They were shut down for a minimal time, but our judges worked really hard to continue to push cases as far as we could to keep the machine going, so we didn't have a severe backlog. That said, we do have a backlog. For instance, we've set an aggressive calendar the judges have in October where we're going to probably quadruple the amount of cases we push through to get caught up. But we're in a little bit better position than I think the superior courts are right now because they shut down. We kept working through. We had that luxury and the resource to do it, so we did. So not as much of a backlog, but there is one. The bigger challenge is the COVID restrictions do not allow us to book people into jail like we normally would. We still have mandatory quarantines and isolations, rapid testings. We provide the vaccine to anybody that walks in the facility there. But because of the restrictions, we are only able to house about 1/3 of our normal capacity. We have a 100-space jail, which isn't the end of the world. We only want people that really need to be in there. So we're talking, for most of us, and just as a structural thing, at the city level, we only deal with misdemeanor crimes. So gross misdemeanors and misdemeanors. All felonies go to Superior Court in the King County jail system. So
For those of us that have not had this, can you differentiate between a gross misdemeanor and a felony? Is it a...
Right, and it's a tricky question because then there's these things called charging criteria, which we talked to about the prosecutor's office. I think last year I talked about charging criteria. But to your question, a felony are your more serious crimes, and the difference is they're higher level crimes. Most of them are violent crimes. A lot of them are violent crimes. And what really it comes down to is the level of fines and incarceration periods. For misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors, it's a maximum of less than a year, so 364 days, and I believe it's a $10,000 fine. Anything higher than that goes to the county, so more than a year. And anything more than 5 years goes to prison. So that's where you get Department of Corrections involved. So it's higher jail time. So you're talking, obviously, your murders, your sex assaults, your armed robberies. Those are all felonies. There are, the felonies you guys look at are your burglaries, right? Your burglaries are felonies. Burglaries to your businesses. And then theft and fraud. If it reaches a certain monetary threshold, which is a moving target because of the prosecutor's charging criteria, then it becomes a felony or a misdemeanor based on the value. Right now, I believe it's a minimum of $2,500 in value before it would be considered a felony. And so there you go.
And just to clarify, for those who have not been, the Kent City Jail is not across the street, it is up the street, so across the street is not 100 units. If you want to just clarify the courthouses for those, because I know we haven't been there, right? Most of us have not. Some of us have. It's okay. So we're going to open for questions on if anyone has a question. I will start with, so as a working in downtown Kent here, there's times when I've come into the office and there's been an unhoused person at the doorstep. We've had a window blown out. Now, we're a financial institution. They're not looking to steal money. They're just creating property. I mean, they're just breaking windows. And we've called and we know it's not a priority. So we sit and wait. What do you recommend for business owners to do when we're in those situations? We were told that as long as they were on the sidewalk, it's public property, but inside your doorway was considered yours. So there's a fine line there as well.
Yeah, great question. So there's a bunch of, the new laws impact that to a degree, but bigger than that is a court decision called Martin v. Boise. And it was out of the Ninth Circuit federal law that came out that it really is currently the prevailing regulations on what law enforcement can do or not do regarding unhoused people, right? So in essence, and I don't want to get in a long dissertation, the law now requires that officers determine if bed space is available. And if there is bed space available, then they can enforce, say, a trespass part of the law. But if they can't determine whether there's bed space available, there's an issue there. We're talking so that's for public property. On private property, you still have the right to have someone removed from your property. The problem that we have is that it creates a very difficult position for the officers to be in. How many of you remember Starbucks and the Philadelphia issue happened a few years ago, where they called in, the patient was in there doing their thing, wasn't committing a crime, and for whatever reason, the staff wanted the person moved. Well, in the minds of the officers, this became a big issue. You remember it became a big racial issue. In the minds of the officers, the property owner, the business owner, has the right to say who's going to be on there. We don't get into the is it a legitimate ethical thing that you're making. We just say, you say this is my property, I want this person removed, they refuse to leave, that's a crime. When they refuse, that's what triggers the trespass crime. And they can be arrested if they don't go. So that's how we've proceeded, right? We don't get into the justification. The law says it's your right. We now have to look at that, and we now have to, we train our officers not to get in the middle of anybody's bias or anybody's maybe nefarious reasons for why they want someone off their property. And that puts the officers in a very precarious spot, right? We don't want that role. I'll just be crystal clear with you. But we've had to train our officers to literally to say, please don't get involved in someone's mess, their social issue mess, whatever it is, if you can. So in those cases, the officers are going to do a determination, and they may say, sorry, we're not forcibly removing this person. We're not going to do it. Because the officers are the ones that will stand whatever bad outcomes of that when it becomes part of the news. That's the issue. The law is still the law. We will come and we'll respond, we'll do an assessment. We really need legitimate reasons for removing people. Most in your circumstances, your example, we will come and we will try to get that person to leave. We will talk to them, we'll negotiate. We've done 2 hours of negotiation, 1 call recently. That's the time it takes. We call every resource that we can. We try to get long-term housing, mental health. Our officers are well versed at trying to connect people with services, and we'll do all of that. Push come to shove, our officer is going to be very hesitant to use force on that person Because more often than not, they've got some kind of mental health issue going on as well. This isn't about compassion. It really is about what do you want us to do, right? And what is the community going to support? And right now, clearly, the community and the courts are saying, we don't want you using force on people because they're homeless. And we're like, understood, we're following.
So I will go to Councilmember Trotner. So with that, is there additional resources that will be allocated to the police department to handle those that are unhoused or having a mental concern, if law enforcement, by definition, isn't supposed to address those concerns?
So a couple things. At our council retreat earlier this year, council agreed to put some money from our budget into the police department for a mental health provider. I think we were running a pilot program with Des Moines and several other cities where we kind of shared that resource. And we have now given the chief the ability to have their own mental health provider. And the chief talked about it. We're not going to send a mental health provider into any kind of a situation. A lot of us support that co-response model where they work together, the police make sure it's a secure situation, and it's something that would benefit from using this resource, and then they would work through that process. The other thing that we did earlier this year was we took a very difficult tax vote as council members to take some of our tax money and put it towards providing services for unhoused individuals. And what we chose to do with some of that money is work with SKIP, which is the South King Housing Partnership.
Close enough.
To take some of that money and work together with other cities, because we talk about this problem being in Kent, but it's a problem everywhere across the region. It's not just something that Kent can solve alone. So it's how can we take that money, put it together with other cities, and kind of get the most bang for your buck and solve this, work on this problem together. Dave can maybe talk a little bit about what King County is doing with purchasing facilities, and I know that they've done it in Auburn, Tukwila, they've done it in Federal Way, and obviously Kent is working on being a partner through that process.
So that is a nice segue. As we see the encampments in Seattle being moved or relocated, and the one near the courthouse, I think, is a current encampment that's being. Our concern that that's going to filter down into our community. So instead of King County handling it, now Kent must handle it with additional resources. Is that an accurate thought? Is it what direction do you see this going?
I've heard every jurisdiction, including Seattle, make that argument. So I think it's there's a little bit of a grass is greener scenario, and I assure you that what you're experiencing, particularly in downtown business core, is not unique to Kent. Burion's downtown business core, some of the same challenges with unhoused individuals with addiction disorders who then engage in activities in order to feed their addiction. And it's a very difficult public policy challenge. My experience, at least from the ride-along with officers in Kent and Burion, is the folks who work on those street teams tell me that in most, I think Burion said in all cases, they've not had someone take them up on those shelter services. So I don't know that that has been a limiting factor necessarily in every community there. I remember my conversations in Burion more clearly where the officers knew that there was room at the Union Gospel Mission in downtown Seattle and would offer to drive. They said we have shelter space available, and yet to have someone take them up on that. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but as the chief mentioned, a lot of these people have behavioral health. Not everyone, but many of the chronically homeless individuals, particularly those that are engaging in activities that are harmful to others, have behavioral health issues, whether it's addiction disorder or mental health, or both in most cases. King County is investing a lot of money in trying to get chronically homeless individuals off the street and into housing with support. One, it's the compassionate thing to do. In the wealthiest nation in the world, to have people living in the streets is an embarrassment. But also, in the long run, it saves lives, it saves money. because it reduces police calls, it reduces hospital costs. And what we're doing is purchasing existing facilities, mostly hotels, perhaps long-term care facilities, in cities that are willing, and working with those jurisdictions, because it is much more affordable than building what we call permanent supported housing. With the permit, it can be 4 or 5 years to build housing, and very, very expensive. Whereas, particularly during COVID here, with what's happened to the real estate market, the ability to purchase hotels at very affordable rates gives us an opportunity. And the plan, and there are sites, several in Seattle, Renton, Federal Way, Auburn, Tukwila, I think is on the way. And so the goal is to have this spread all over the county. In part, and I find cities more willing when they see other cities doing it, because exactly the fear you mentioned. You know, it's that old baseball movie, if you build it, they will come. That's the fear a lot of people have. But if we're providing services throughout King County, then we take that dynamic out, because this really is a regional issue. And we also have the resources available to provide services on site, mental health, addiction services, perhaps even other services. And the reason we're bullish on this is because during COVID, in order to get people who were living in shelters off the floor, where they were 6 inches next, in these congregate shelters, the folks who were unhoused would literally be 6 inches away from each other on the floor. And a lot of these people have health issues, and COVID could have ravaged that population. So in order to protect that human life, our public health department acquired properties for those individuals to stay in hotel rooms. The outcomes that were reported in terms of health outcomes, mental health outcomes, criminal involvement outcomes were remarkable. We saw very, very positive outcomes when somebody has the security of a private, secure place, a bed, and a shower. It's amazing what that does to help someone get focused, and then having the resources on site. So I like this, I supported it, in part because it isn't complicated. It's not a whole lot of bureaucracy. We're doing some regional homeless thing and moving the deck chairs around and hiring consultants and all that, and we've been doing that for years. This is actually purchasing properties, getting people off the street. We should be able to get about 1,600 to 2,000 individuals into that stable housing. So that's what we're trying to do and working with the cities.
Thank you for that update. And just so you know, our sponsor, the Fair Mortgage, does do multifamily, in case you want to reach out to them for some assistance on that side. Now, this is supposed to be a conversation they can hear from you. Zenobia, I believe you had a question.
Right, I just had a couple points for clarification. I appreciate everything that you guys have said, given this kind of overview and background, but from the business, community standpoint, what I continue to hear is, what do I do, right? So we understand what the law says, and I think Carmen asked the question about if someone breaks your window and they're there, you call the cops, and the cops don't come, what are your other options? Or should we expect the cops to come? What should we be doing? Should we be taking pictures? Should we be keeping a log? And then we talked about, okay, well, you can't accost them, right? You can't stop them. Okay, so is a warrant going to be out for their arrest, or are they going to be back next week? Do I call? I mean, we need some real, what from a business standpoint, what do you recommend that we do to help ourselves help you?
Great question. So first off, you guys have heard me for years, most of you have heard me for years say, call 911 and let us figure out what we can do. And that hasn't changed. So you all have me in this position so that I can be solution oriented. I know I've been gloom and doom up to now, so let me get to the good news. Kent PD isn't going anywhere. So we're using less lethal, just so you know. Because the other law that I talked about, 1310, requires us to have less lethal weapons, requires me as a chief to provide and train my officers, and we're choosing to follow that part of the law. So we're threading the needle, so to speak, being compliant with the law, but also putting practical solutions to them. My solution to the fix where if I don't have probable cause for an arrest and the person walks away is, we have put out direction to our officers that if it's a violent crime or a crime against persons, that they will warn the person that they are about to be arrested, for obstructing justice, and if they run, at that point, they're authorized by me to use reasonable necessary force to stop that person and arrest them if necessary, okay? So what I'm saying in an indirect way is, we're still going to push the envelope, and for violent criminals, the Kent Police Department is still going to arrest people and find a solution and do our part of it. Now, whether they get prosecuted or held in jail is beyond my control. That's a whole nother situation. So on your trespassing, on your litterers, on your vandalism, on your tag and graffiti, and all the stuff which I know and I am very sorry and frustrated is occurring, but what seems like an epidemic level, you call 911 is still the answer. Where I'm asking for understanding is, understand that the outcome that you expected prior to July 25th may not be the outcome you're gonna get, right? And I don't want this to be, again, this isn't a point finger thing, but what's happening is the police officers are being held responsible for not doing anything. And the mantra that can't be, and it's not true in the city of Kent, I promise you, we're not taking our ball and going home. We're not mad, and we love our community, we want to do what we can. And the direction for me is find solutions of what you can do, because there's always something that can be done, right? So let us figure that part out, please call. Just be patient, because now you know we have major restrictions that determine the outcome. The trespasser, we're gonna get them services. If they absolutely refuse to go and they're a problem, more times than not, our officers will forcibly remove them. If it's like a chronic thing, like if they're blocking your entrance to your business, we have to do something, right? But please don't expect they're gonna go to jail. That's kind of what I'm telling you. So keep calling, and I hope I answered your question. Any other examples? Because I'll answer them if I can.
I believe Ira had a question.
So, I just want to know, like, so she just asked the question, like, what can we do? And I'm hearing you guys tell us a lot about the increase in the jails and how many people we can't put in there, the homeless problem. You're putting a lot of money into buying places for them to go so they have homes or a place to stay. And how does that affect the business? What can we do? Because yeah, they're in a building and they're off the street, but now they come right into the business. Now there's more traffic. Now there's more needles. All of these things are there. So what can we do as a community, the businesses in the community, to create a line of deterrence or defense to show that we're with you guys working to actually do something? We have to be able to have some kind of accountability for our property as well, right?
There is one salient thing that you can do, and I strongly encourage you, so I'm about to get in trouble. You have to express your concerns to the state legislators. Nobody here makes the laws that allow us to or not to assist you. That's the bottom line. This group and groups that have these concerns have to speak to their legislators, because I don't make the laws. I get them handed to me every year, and we do the best we can with what's given to us. So my number one message is, you have to get to your legislators and have the discussions about what you want to see.
So speaking of which, Kent Government Affairs meeting is next Wednesday, 3 p.m. in the Kent Chamber offices. And what we're working on right now is working on our legislative priorities for this upcoming session. And so we can have our verbiage, we can have our speakers ready, and we can go and show what the community is feeling and seeing in that. And so again, next Wednesday, and you can check the Kent Chamber website for that. I see a question here, yes.
Yeah, this is for the Chief Police. In 2017, August 18, my office was burned down completely. I gave you guys the video, everything was so clear, nothing was done. In March of this year, I saw a guy taking my computer from my office, and I took the video to you guys. Nothing was done. So that's prior to the law. So what is going on? I just need some explanations as to why nothing was done, no feedback to me. And they kept going to the office. About a few months ago, they shot the whole building with a bullet, and nothing was done. So I'm just curious as to what you want me to do, because it's costing me a lot of money.
Understood. Yeah, understood. I'm sorry for that. So I don't know the specifics of your case from 2018.
2007.
17, okay. But taking the scenario you just put there, there could be a lot of reasons as to why, quote, nothing was done. And usually it's not nothing was done. Usually the case was there and maybe there wasn't sufficient evidence. So seeing someone on video is good. Being able to identify and locate that person on video is a separate thing, right? So I don't know if that was possible. If it was possible, the next hurdle in the process is filing the case and whether or not the case would be taken. And that's a whole nother issue. You guys have heard me, and I'm not gonna go down this path. We have significant challenges in our King County criminal justice system. What you expect, sir, to be done with someone who's done that to your property and what happens are worlds apart right now. And again, that's another entity, that's the courts, that's the prosecutor's office. If you give me, here's what I will do. If you give me the incident number, or at least if we can connect, I've got my backup team there in the back. We will follow up and I will get you answers. So the one thing where we clearly failed on this, and I'll own it, is we failed to circle back with information on what we did. And I think so let us look into that. And I assure you, personally, I will get back to you on where your case was. And if there's a hole on our end, we'll fix that hole. But 9 times out of 10, I'm gonna assure you, the hole wasn't on our end.
I think Maria had a question back. Did you have a question earlier?
Yeah, street races. I mean, nothing seems to be done to get them off of 180th and East Valley or down where I live on 72nd. Where's your race through the night? And my business gets stalled because the guys can't, or the customer can't come into the premise to do their activity. And this is Friday and Saturday, sometimes Thursday. Can't we do something? I know you guys are there, but you're just there.
Yeah, so another great question. So we have, just so you know, and there was a couple of press releases on it, I don't know if you saw, we did take down major, like 23 of the organizers for the street racers and did major cases on them. We impounded cars. Kent has historically, since I was new here, been dealing with this. I mean, I was in charge of operations where we detained 300 plus racers and impounded dozens of cars. So it's a process, we keep doing it and it keeps coming back, and it really is the accountability thing. There are some things that could be done, but again, it's a state legislator thing. I know it sounds like a cop-out. My solution, this is just my crazy idea, if upon conviction for illegal street racing, the authority to seize the racer's car was enacted by law, I assure you, because they love their cars, I assure you, that's a fix right there. Yeah. There's something we can do, but it's not gonna happen. The loud mufflers, it's illegal to have them on your cars. It's not illegal to sell them. Tell me how that makes sense, right? So, ma'am, to your point though, let's talk about what now. What now? We're gonna continue to do our investigations. We actually have a trooper that's been put in the police department. Sergeant Bava is one of our regional experts. He's trained that trooper up, and they're doing long-term investigating. We've taken a different approach. What I call the cheetah and the antelope approach of going out and chasing them around, we're doing much less of that, particularly now. Remember, can we pursue for racing in this state? The answer is no, unequivocally cannot. Not that we were doing a lot before, but now for sure we can't. So what we're doing is investigative behind the scenes. We're finding information, we're tracking down video, we're doing search warrants, we're seizing cars and impounding them when we make the cases, and we're actually looking at kind of racketeering and organized crime charges in some of these circumstances. So you're not seeing it because you're not seeing the lights and sirens going, but we are working on it and it's having an impact.
At one point, weren't we like the third largest city on the west coast of street racing? People come from out of state to race in our area.
We are a destination because of our industrial complex, for sure.
And they want to buy a home, Fairwood Mortgage. I believe the city council, I'm trying to help you out.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
The city council did a survey and they were looking at street pillows and and moving things around in industrial parks for a while, correct?
We've looked at everything. 2 legislative cycles ago, we actually put a lot of stock into becoming the first pilot for a automated noise detection system, where we could set them up on streets, and if your mufflers were beyond a certain decibel, there's video of it, right? So it's kind of like red light cameras, it would issue a ticket. Well, every one of those racer cars, has loud exhaust, so we thought, perfect, this was gonna work. Unfortunately, the state legislature did not give us the authority to even issue warnings. So we were stuck with running a pilot program where we couldn't send warnings to see if we could make an impact. Well, all we wanted to do was issue warning tickets saying, hey, you were here going through this place with a loud exhaust and here's your warning. It fell through. We've done different design issues, pillows. If you run a manufacturer and you have major trucking businesses going through, you don't want those things. They're harmful. The speed bumps and the speed curtains, and they slow down production. They're harmful to your inventory. So there's a lot that goes into it. We've tried a lot of things, and so far nothing's really stuck. I think we're looking for help in all these circumstances. We've kind of moved to a either or discussion, right? It's either give them services and let them live the way they want to live, or hold them accountable, and then now we're housing homeless people in our jails. I don't know why we're looking at the conversation that way. The answer is we need both. We need services, we need to place people and get them help, and at the point where it does not work or they refuse and they're becoming a problem or danger to the community, then the other side of it has to be there as well, or we're never going to get out of this. That's, as a 30-year law enforcement officer, that's my perspective.
Yeah, yes, you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a comment actually, and maybe some information.
There's a question somewhere in there, right?
So, yeah, sorry. The question is, I think what I see in our downtown, and I think this has happened well beyond COVID, well beyond these new legislative laws and everything, is that there's not, I mean, when I grew up, it was always, if you break the law, there's a consequence. And it seems like a lot of those consequences have been removed, and specifically with drug use. And a lot of the homeless and some of the challenge of mental illness, I think, is related or starts that way and becomes accelerated. We had a situation, we have a street market happening in our downtown, and a couple weekends ago, we had somebody out there smoking meth on the corner during the event. My associate asked him to move on. He just, blank, called the police came, thankfully, very quickly, but couldn't do anything. They stood there, just stood there, and this guy covered his head with his coat and continued, clearly was smoking meth or doing whatever underneath his thing. About 35, 40 minutes, he decided to move on, and that was the end of that. The message that sends to people, for our businesses, and for coming into the community is, I don't want to go down there. I don't want to be any part of that. And there's no consequence. And so I guess I'm asking, what can we do to help our citizens have these conversations with our legislators? What specifically should they be saying, this is what I need? Because I think if we say, hey, tell your legislators what you want, a lot of them, I don't think a lot of people know how to formulate or know what exactly, they know what they don't want. But is there ways that you can provide us some cues or keys or something that would say, these are the types of questions you should be asking your legislators? Because I think that this problem, to me, seems like there's no consequence. Therefore, people that are street racing, doing drugs, committing crimes, they know they're not going to get busted for it. They know it. So now the word is like, oh.
And that's exactly what we're doing in government affairs next Wednesday. And we work with the lobbyists that helps us format the wording. We know which legislators are in the different committees to approach. And even though they're not in session right now, they prepare their bills in the off season, and they start working and can submit as early as December new bills and new legislation. So that's what government affairs does. And we show up with those issues, we craft them. We also work with the South Sound Chambers Coalition to have a regional approach. So we have a regional voice on what impacts us. And so it's not just Kent Chamber, but we have our priorities, and then we also align with the neighboring chambers to have a regional business voice in Olympia. And we are about, I want to say 15 years old now on that, and that's how we got transportation moved forward in our South End. We came together. So again, government affairs meeting is next Wednesday, and it's open to everyone, and we are preparing our issues. And you got a hand up back there, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The mic is coming your way unless you want to really project.
Can you hear me?
Not really. Just helping you out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. My name is Lon Evans. I'm a State Farm agent in Kent, 188th and 72nd Avenue. I haven't had any issues like a lot of you other business owners in here have had because I just moved here to Kent last year. However, I did recently, well, not recently, I'm new to Washington. I used to live in Michigan 5 years ago. And one of the things I noticed being here is that a lot of the laws and legislation are kind of wait and see. So it's almost like they're just throwing it up against the board and, let's see what happens, right? I mean, we saw with Chop and Chaz, they let that go on forever until 2 people were killed. And then they were like, oh, you know what, maybe we should stop this now. And I just feel like a lot of the municipalities around the Greater Seattle area are practicing law this way. And I mean, what is it gonna take? Is it gonna take a business owner who is constantly getting his business vandalized for him to go out and finally fight back, kill somebody, for the police to do something, or not, and I'm not saying it's necessarily the police's fault, but there's gotta be better solutions than just simply getting information. I mean, at some point, people aren't gonna hide anymore. There was a situation in Seattle where a guy was having a mental episode and stepped in front in broad daylight, 10 in the morning, grabbed a 4-year-old girl from her mom and dad in their face in broad daylight, and then tried to abduct her. And then when the police called him, he had a mental episode. I'm sure he's back in the street somewhere. But I would have killed that guy. I carried, right? So what are my consequences? I guess that's just my biggest concern. It just feels like everybody's passing it along, and well, as long as there's no issues, we'll just let it go. But our legislation on it is crap. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's really crap. And it's gonna take somebody to die for things to change. It's gonna take violence for things to move along. I mean, I feel for this guy here, and I sell insurance, and I have a lot of my customers call and say, my business was vandalized, or somebody stole this, and somebody stole that. And yeah, it's more than just a claim, because just because they have insurance doesn't mean those things don't matter to them. And it's not like you can pick up a car and move a car, you can move people, but we can't move our businesses. Some of us have our life savings in these businesses. Some of us have everything tied to the business. Insurance policies are not. It's principle. At some point, you get tired of restarting and restarting. That costs money. So what, I guess I don't have a question. That was more like a rant.
And since you're new, I was kind, because normally I would. But what I hear you saying is that law-abiding citizens are going to end up reaching the consequences of a charge because we stand and defend. And a plug for our champion arms back there, who has a great training facility for self-defense in that area. Firearms, not weapons. But if we're starting to carry, gun sales are up, classes are up. I was in a class of 15 women. I think it was 15 of us in one class, just recertifying ourselves to be prepared. And so we don't want to be a victim. That's our goal. And I don't want you to come to my house and say, Carmen, I saw you in a video and it was clear to identify you, and now I have to take you in because this has risen up. So that's the frustration I believe I'm relaying, and what, is there a different consequence?
So we've had people defend their property. You've got to make sure you're within the law. If you have a firearm, please get well educated and trained on it, right? That has to go together, and secure your weapons, obviously. So I just want to put out there, in our history, there have been very few times where people have been criminally charged for lawfully defending themselves and their property, okay? The issue is, that's what we're for. I don't want you to have to defend yourself because we can't, right? So that's really, to your point, those are very great points you made in the back there. We are here for that, and we want to do that. We just need to make sure that there's a supportive process and the restrictions are not so much to where we can't do it. right? Because I hear that a lot. Oh, well, we'll just take care of business ourselves. Yeah, I don't want that. That's what we should be doing.
We have you on the record for that.
Yep.
Good morning, did you have, here, I thought there was another hand over here somewhere. Yes.
So I think my question kind of goes along with that. What do I have to do to ensure before you get there that you are allowed to take it to the next level if I'm being harmed?
Physically harm or property harm?
Okay, I'm thinking more of a physically harmed on my person or who I'm with. I mean, if you can't chase somebody, do I say to you, they just pulled a gun and pointed it at me and that gives you sufficient probable cause to go after him? Or do you have to see the gun mark on me, you know?
No, so this goes back to the reasonable suspicion versus probable cause, right?
Right.
So prior, if you call in and say, someone just pointed a gun and threatened me, and they're wearing a purple polka dot shirt and blue jeans, and they just left going eastbound, that's reasonable suspicion. We may happen to see a purple polka dotted person with jeans running eastbound, and that's good enough, used to be good enough for us to detain by force. Now what we're gonna need, and what we're getting really good at, is we're gonna have to somehow close the loop on probable cause and have you identify that person, like point them out. We're gonna have to find creative ways. Now remember, Kent's doing it different. South King is actually doing it. All the chiefs in the valley have got on board with this. We are going to push the line, and we still believe the case law, the federal case law, and this is it's called Terry v. Ohio. If you guys may have heard the whole stop and frisk laws, they're referred to as Terry stops. And they're based on federal law. It says reasonable suspicion is all you need to stop someone to investigate, and if necessary, use force. Kent, Auburn, Renton, Federal Way, Tukwila, Des Moines are all holding the line on that, because we think the federal law is the prevailing law, and we think that I'm not gonna let you be assaulted at gunpoint and say, sorry, we can't chase you. You've got the wrong police chief for that. I'm not gonna do it. They can decertify me if they want to. I don't know what that means for a chief, because I don't do real law enforcement, but I don't want that to happen, but we're gonna hold the line, so call. That's not an issue. Where it becomes an issue is, please do not be upset at my officers when they say, I can't chase him. I know that's the guy or the gal, but I cannot use force to stop them. And then we're gonna get really good at investigating after the fact. We talked about the money and costs of doing, of these services and this and that. I wanna make it crystal clear. It will take us twice as long and probably double the resources to do an investigation after the fact than to say, that's the guy, go get him. So I want to make it clear, because I've heard this come up before. Well, aren't we going to need less resources? Well, I'm here to tell you no. That's actually the opposite of what we're going to need. Violent crimes, call. Don't worry about that part. And call on all of these. We'll figure it out.
Zenobia, question?
Yeah, I had a quick question just to follow up. I know David mentioned the backlog, and you had said limited resources to prosecute. So for us that don't know, where are those funds normally coming from? What's the plan to get more resources? When is that going to start? I mean, talk us through that. There are many resources. Where do they come from, and how do you plan to get more of those resources to not have such a backlog?
That's a great question. The way King County is funded is through a property tax levy, and we get a little bit of sales tax. But most of our money comes with strings attached. Your sewer rates pay for the sewer system. Bus fares help pay for our transit system. The rest of buses are funded through a special tax the state let us make. So we have a pot of money that we on the county council actually can control. And we call it our general fund. Those are the flexible dollars. Most of that goes to criminal justice already, about 75% of that. And the rest funds other general government functions. County government's not allowed to raise taxes without a vote of the public, other than a 1% escalation in what we collect in property taxes. And traditionally, inflation has been higher than that. So the exercises we go through have been really about how do we find savings each year. It would require going to the voters for more money. We did just have a very public and robust debate about the use of our federal COVID funds. The federal government has given a lot of money to local governments. And the county executive proposed a budget to spend these COVID funds that a lot of us felt did not address adequately the challenges facing our courts. It's like the chief said, during COVID, it was very, very difficult. They tried to continue cases at the main Bauer Center in Bellevue and big space things. But it was a very tough political debate. We ended up doubling the funding the executive provided, but we had a packed virtual room. I was called racist for funding the courts. We had lots and lots of people that are arguing against funding it. And so that I mention that because that speaks to the challenges of going to the voters right now in a county. And so I think the long-term challenge is trying to communicate the ways in which we can achieve the goals of racial justice. And keep in mind that's what's led to a lot of these reforms and the killing of black men in this country and incarceration rates that are disproportionate to the population for communities of color. And a majority of the public finally got so fed up, and this is democracy, the elected officials listen and changes have tried to be made. My belief is we can work on those issues of justice. At the same time, we should be trying to improve public safety. Those don't have to be in conflict. And so the question about kind of how to lobby, my advice would be to not set this up as an adversarial discussion between racial justice and public safety, because they're, right now it's very much framed that way in the public and in the media, and that is what makes it very difficult to then get public support for funding. But really the tool we have is to go to the voters and ask them to raise their property taxes. That's it. Or for the state or federal government to give us more money. We don't, as a county council. I'd like to remind you, even though your tax bill comes from the county, we just collected from everyone else, just for a reminder. But we're constrained, very, very constrained. We could take the rest of our general fund. You know, we could eliminate our natural resources department, the legislative branch, all these things, and that would be a 25% increase. You know, I don't think that would get us there. So we also are looking, I'll be quick here, we're trying to go upstream. We're investing in prevention. I think we can't take our eye off the ball there. It's cheaper, we know, in the long run if you get a young person off to a positive start in life. So the voters did recently approve something called the Best Starts for Kids levy. We're one of the only counties in the country that does this. We're making massive investment in young people, in early childhood education, in after-school programs to help in the school to prison pipeline, those kinds of things. We need to continue to invest in the prevention side because it's cost effective and we have other funding tools we can use there. But it's a long-term challenge until we fund counties differently.
Thank you, Dave.
Sorry,
Representative Orwell came in a little bit late, but one of the questions to Representative Orwell, just to bring you up to speed, was as we get ready for this next session, we were talking about how do we advocate for some adjustments to the reforms that have come through. And there was talk at one point that there might be a special session this November. Is that on the agenda as the items to make some adjustments?
Thank you, those are great questions, and my apologies for being late. I had a personal matter that needed attending to. And I also want to thank Councilmember Dave Upthrow for his comments, because I do think this is a critical window for us all to come together. I have tremendous respect for the chief and law enforcement and our community leaders. And I think we need to start looking at what are the changes or things we need to do to work better together. And I'm certainly committed to doing that along with my colleagues. One of the things I worked on this session was a 988 bill. There's going to be a 3-digit number coming for people in behavioral health crisis. And I'm really proud that we will be creating a system that will be much more responsive, from call centers to rapid response, I was very happy to work with the police chief and the other South King County chiefs on co-responder models that are law enforcement and police, which I think can be highly effective. So I think there's important changes coming, and we need to do it together. We need to be sitting around a table to see how we really support law enforcement and keep our communities safe. And I do think there's roads there. As far as a special session, there's some discussion that there could be a transportation session, which would allow us the opportunity to go make some of the changes that maybe need to happen. And so my hope is to work with my colleagues and our police chiefs and community leaders on what those should look like, so we're prepared as we move forward. But really important discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Warwall. And so I want to give us time to wrap up here and be on time. And so we do thank each of you for coming in and having the conversation. It's not an easy conversation. You're never sure what someone's going to ask or say or what their experiences are. But we're looking, what the business community really is looking for, again, is some of that transparency, getting the feedback when we file cases to know what we should do and how we can be doing that. And maybe that's on the agenda to improve as we move forward on that side. So just in the last, in 60 seconds or so, do you guys each have a final comment you'd like to make to the business community?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you all for being here, because part of getting through this is us working together to find solutions. You talked about how can you help as a business. Obviously, the chief said call 911, but all of us council members are available, and we'd love to hear from the community. We might not be able to solve your problem, but we can help find the right person for you to talk to, or we can provide that information for you to contact your legislators. Prior to any session, the council will talk about our priorities that we want to see brought to Olympia, and hearing feedback from you is really important when we have those conversations.
Well, thank you for the discussion. It's been great. I'd like to say that it was that I could not predict the circumstances you're in. But unfortunately, because it is so prevalent, I'm well aware and saddened, quite honestly, that we're not having better impact in terms of public safety. So I want to put that there. That said, this police department continues to be mindful and very supportive. We want this to be a great place for businesses to thrive in this city. Mayor Ralph has made that and continues to make that a priority amongst all the priorities. And so we recognize our obligation to make that happen for you. So that hasn't changed. We talked to ad nauseum already about call. We're going to do what we can, and we appreciate your patience. So thank you.
Excuse me. I think the murder of George Floyd really elevated an important national movement. And for me, that movement is about justice, specifically justice for Black, Indigenous people of color. And I think delivering justice means ensuring that everyone is safe and feels safe in their community. And delivering justice means listening to the voices of those who've been impacted by injustice. And I think that is what has led to important reforms. But it's critical as we do this important work, and it's difficult to try to change historic systems in ways that make a more fair and just society. As we do that work, we can't take our eye off the ball that we have a responsibility to ensure public safety. Democracy depends on the rule of law. It depends upon if you have a law in place, as the speaker here left really resonated with me. If you have a law in place and it's ignored, that sends a message to everyone else. And so we need to have accountability and safety and not take our eye off the ball to doing that. I know today just scratched the surface. I'm easy to reach. I'm the only Dave up the Grove in the phone book, I guarantee it. And I'm always happy to grab a cup of coffee and listen more and have a conversation because difficult issues.
Thank you, because we didn't talk about body cameras, we didn't talk about a lot of other issues or topics, I should say, as well. So we will continue the conversation. At this point, I will turn it over to Zenobia Harris, our CEO of the day.
Awesome, thank you. I like this CEO today. That's a huge job when I take tomorrow, I'm going to say, sir. Okay, so listen, I sure appreciate you guys being here today. I know, like I said, Carmen said, this is a very difficult conversation, but the reason for this conversation for us as a chamber is really about follow-up. So the conversation does not stop here. I've been frantically taking notes in the back. This is recorded. This is something that we're going to continue to bring in front of you. One thing I didn't bring up that I didn't have time is this is a request from the business community, more focused to you, Tony, is that there are ways that we can help ourselves. And one of those ways is by putting up fences, putting up cameras. Those things require permits. The permit process for the city seems to be a little stalled and antiquated. And so our request from the business community is if the law can't help us help ourselves by fast tracking those safety type permits, right? So that will be our ask directly to the council. For that as well. But those are things like that we actually look at a chamber and figure out what is it that we can do to bridge that gap. And so I am full aware that these are two totally different conversations, and I wanted someone here from Human Services so that we can make this distinction. I don't believe, and I don't think anyone else here believes, that it's all black people committing crime or all homeless people committing crime. When a business owner calls and they have an issue, I don't care if they think the person is black, white, or indifferent. They want that person to be held accountable. And so we understand that. So again, Carmen, thank you so much for moderating such a great conversation and putting out the invitation. We laughed about it, but the invitation is real. The invitation to come to the government affairs meeting is actually real because this is how change happens. We can't continue to sit in the room and talk about it. We have to put those actions on a piece of paper, and we have to have a plan. When we go to Olympia, it's important that our businesses, this is what I do. This is what I'm supposed to do. Our government affairs, they've signed on to this committee to make sure that legislation, that we can try to push legislation that's beneficial to the business community. The piece that's missing and the piece that's critical is that you as business owners, the stories that you send to me, we had all of those listed today, the stories, all of those, I want you to join me in Olympia so that we can make a difference and we can make a change as it relates to safety in the community. And again, I just have to make this point, from a business standpoint, we're not looking at black, white, or anything. We are looking at our businesses, the cost of our insurance going up, what it's going to cost for me to move to a different town. All of those things are what we're looking at. And so we are really focused and we're hyper-focused on that. So I appreciate you guys being here today, but I would appreciate more continued support, continued coming to the meetings, and joining our government affairs. So.
The third Wednesday of the month.
Thank you. Third Wednesday of the month, and you can go via Zoom. I know we have I'm going to call him Detective Hollis. Is that
Commander
Hollis? I got it wrong. Commander Hollis and I had a great lunch a few months ago, and we talked about transparency. There's a lot of things going on in the city that we just don't know. I don't know where to go and find the statistics. I don't know where to go and find that. And so him and I are going to continue that conversation to figure out how and at what cadence do we bring that back to the business community. Because again, if we can make this full circle, right, folks are getting arrested, folks, things are moving along. If you know that, you would feel better. But if you stay silo and you don't know that those things are happening, it doesn't do us any good. So I appreciate that conversation with Commander Hollis, and we'll continue that there. So, all right. Any other questions about safety or anything before we move on to, it's so weird to just transfer right out of something so important to raffles.
Yeah. I mean,